Picture this. It's the early 1900s. The United States is literally carving a path through the jungles of Panama in one of the biggest, most audacious engineering projects ever attempted. But buried deep in all those plans, one single member, just one, threatened to make or break the entire project for the next 100 years. That number was the width of the canal's locks. And the story of how they picked it, well, it's a fascinating lesson in how you try to build for a future you can't predict. See, this wasn't just about digging a really big ditch. The real fight at the heart of the Panama Canal was a massive, high-stakes bet on what was to come. The question they were wrestling with is something we still deal with all the time. How do you design something permanent, something this massive, for ships that haven't even been invented yet, for a world you can only guess at? And believe it or not, that entire massive bet all came down to this one little measurement, the width of the locks. It sounds so simple, right? But that number would literally dictate the size of every single ship that could pass through for decades. And it sparked this incredible battle between the engineers on the ground and the military strategists back in Washington. Okay, so first up, the original plan. Initially, it seemed pretty straightforward. The engineers looked at the biggest ships out there, they made some projections, and they landed on a number they felt was plenty big, 100 feet. This wasn't just a guess. It was the official approved baseline for the whole project. And you can just feel the confidence in their official statement. The Isthmian Canal Commission, these are the guys actually building the thing, they put it in writing. They said 100 feet was ample. It could handle any commercial ship they could dream up and any warship that was even on the drawing board. Case closed, right? Well, not so fast. The chief engineer, a guy named George Goethals, laid out some very real, very practical problems with going any wider. I mean, it wasn't just about pouring more concrete. Wider locks meant, you guessed it, higher costs. They'd take longer to fill up and empty out, which means fewer ships could pass through each day. And maybe worst of all, it would put a huge strain on the limited water supply that fed the entire system. From an engineering standpoint, 100 feet was the smart, efficient, logical choice. But then, a new and very powerful voice joins the conversation. The U.S. Navy. And they weren't thinking about the budget for 1908. No, they were thinking about protecting the country in 1928 and beyond. And they did not beat around the bush. The General Board of the Navy came out with a formal opinion saying 100 feet was, and I quote, insufficient. Not for the ships they had then, but for the probable ships of the future. They argued that a sound policy absolutely required a clear width of 110 feet. This was a direct shot at the engineers' plan. You see, the Navy was playing the long game. They knew that naval technology was moving incredibly fast. Battleships were just going to keep getting bigger, wider, more powerful. For them, this was never about building a canal just for 1908. It was about future-proofing a critical military asset for generations. Of course, building for the future, well, it comes with a price tag. A memo from the chief engineer broke it all down. To jump to 110 feet, like the Navy wanted, that's about a 10% cost increase, or a little over $5 million. To go all the way to 125 feet, which some people were even suggesting, whoa, that's a massive 25% cost increase. All of a sudden, this whole debate about a few feet here or there turned into a multi-million-dollar decision. So you've got the engineers versus the Navy, right? Well, just when you think you've got the whole story, a total wildcard steams into view from the commercial world, and it makes even the Navy's request look kind of modest. And we're not talking about some far-off hypothetical ships here. No way. These things were already on the water. The brand new passenger liners, the incredible Lusitania and Mauretania, were the biggest ships on the planet, with a beam, that's their width, of 88 feet. These things were floating giants, and a clear signal that the shipping industry was growing way faster than anyone had planned for. And this is where the raw numbers really matter. Imagine trying to squeeze an 88-foot wide ship into a 100-foot wide lock. That leaves you just 6 feet of space on either side. That is a terrifyingly small margin for error. But if you increase that lock width to 110 feet, you almost double your buffer zone. Now you've got a much, much safer 11 feet of clearance on each side. And the public totally got what was at stake. A newspaper at the time, the New York Tribune, put it perfectly. They basically asked readers to just imagine a 25,000-ton steel ship giving that concrete wall even a slight bump. The results, they said, were not to be contemplated without much dread. This wasn't just some abstract fear. It was a serious question of safety and keeping the whole canal running. So the stage is set. You've got the engineers pushing for efficiency, you've got the Navy demanding room for the future, and you have these new commercial ships that are bigger than anyone ever expected. The pressure was really on President Teddy Roosevelt and the Canal Commission to make the final call. After all the arguments, all the memos, all the debate, the decision was made. The final number was going to be 110 feet. That was it. A compromise had been reached, and the final width of the Panama Canal was literally set in stone and a whole lot of concrete. So why 110? Well, it was kind of the perfect middle ground. It gave the Navy what it needed to feel secure about the future. That 10% cost increase was seen as a pretty reasonable price to pay for national security. It gave those giant new commercial ships a much safer margin for error, and it avoided the really huge costs and water problems that would have come with going even wider. It just worked. And it is hard to overstate how huge this one decision was. That 110-foot width created an entire class of ships, we call them Panama ships, for a full century. It dictated how navies designed their fleets and how companies designed their cargo ships. It literally shaped the flow of global trade and military power for the next 100 years. Which kind of brings us right back to that first big question. The engineers back in 1908 made a call that held up for 100 years. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? As we build the big projects of our time, the high-speed rail, the new power grids, the digital networks, what's the width that we're debating right now? What are the choices we're making today that will define what's possible for the next century?